Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship. Warning. Censorship.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rebel News live stream on this, a Tuesday, October 26, 2021. I'm David Menzies, and my guest, let me tell you about my guest. She goes by the initials SGR, and you know what? I Googled SGR the other day, and it's a stock on the Toronto Stock Exchange, Slate Grocery Reid. And like my guest, it is soaring, baby. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
David, I'm doing great. You know what? I take a lot of joy in listening to you rehearse quietly under your breath my introduction. I don't know if the viewers at home can hear because I don't know when your mic goes live to YouTube and some of the other platforms, but I sort of know how much care and preparation you put into those introductions. So I want to thank you for that, but also for your enthusiasm.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, a lot of prep does go into this. I mean,
I know.
It's a running gag, if you will, the Khaleesi and the she-devil part, but I have to come up with something new to begin it. And I'm running out of angles, Sheila. I don't know how much longer I can get something original for you.
Oh, you know, I was just thinking, do we have time? Today's Tuesday. Our next show together is Thursday, and then it's Halloween. And do you and I have time to plan Halloween, like a joint Halloween costume over a day and a half across the country? You know what? If two people could do it, it's us, because we are lovers of the spooky season. We'll have to maybe give a little bit of thought. I know that we were like, go easy on the costumes, David, but I think if I participate, maybe it'll be okay.
And you know what? We are lovers of that season and that day. And one of the first stories we should get to after you tell the folks what the ostensible policy reason of this next 59 minutes are, Sheila, isn't it so horrible, the fun burglars out there? The people,
fun burglars, the worst.
Oh, that's your word. I've culturally appropriated it here in Ontario. And just to take all the fun and joy. You know, it never went away from me. As a kid, I think Halloween is second only to Christmas and maybe even a dead heat tie. And as an adult, I still love it. I mean, I don't go trick-or-treating anymore, of course, but the whole idea of, normal times decorating the house, seeing the trick-or-treaters come. And there's always some activist out there, some progressive, some Marxist that has to, like a vampire draining you of blood, just suck all the fun out of Halloween. And folks, we have a story from Spruce Grove, Alberta. Oh my goodness, it makes you wonder sometimes why people even want to contemplate doing a good thing to begin with. But that's the tease. Sheila, what is the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here today?
Sure. Let's get that out of the way, because I'm so full of opinions about this story from Spruce Grove, because we are firm believers in the spooky season. I love it. And before anybody writes me letters, Halloween's a Catholic holiday, so it's okay. But what we're doing here for the next 54 minutes, and we always go overtime. This is the Rebel News Daily live stream. Used to just be on Friday, just hosted by Ezra Levant. That all changed when the pandemic struck. We were all grounded because nobody could travel, and many of you were stuck at home because your job went to work from home or just closed up altogether. So we thought, what a good way to talk about the news, because it's changing so fast. Restrictions are being added, being lifted all the time. And we thought, okay, well, it's probably going to only last 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks to flatten the curve. What are we approaching, month 20 or 21? I don't know. There's a lot of 2 weeks in there to flatten the curve. But we initially started off the live stream on YouTube, but YouTube has gone full censorship mode. There are so many things that we can't say on YouTube, or we will jeopardize the ability to have our YouTube channel. And we like the 1.5 million people who subscribe to us on YouTube. So we don't want to abandon you. We want to keep giving you content as best we can. We don't like the fact that the big tech oligarchs are sort of in the middle of our relationship with you. So we are going to start off broadcasting on YouTube. But while we're broadcasting on YouTube, we're also simultaneously broadcasting on Rumble, Odyssey, and Super U. And at some point in the show, we will have to say goodbye to YouTube, but not goodbye to our YouTube viewers. We want to encourage you to move over to one of those other platforms and watch us. And the beauty of those other platforms is that unlike YouTube, which completely demonetized us, they give you the ability to support the work that we do through a tip or a Super U shout, a Rumble rant, an Odyssey hyper chat. There's a bunch of different ways over there that you can support the work that we do completely willingly, because we'll never take any of Justin Trudeau's money. So that's the nuts and bolts. We're going to start off on YouTube, and then we're just going to eventually just cut the YouTube feed and go over to one of those other platforms.
Yeah, it's not that we want to necessarily, Sheila. It's that we have to for self-preservation. YouTube, on bogus reasons, already demonetized us. And I'm not saying that out of bitterness. As you well know, Sheila, we were violating, I think, their health and safety guidelines. Our lawyers went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and there were things like you can't advocate suicide. We don't do that. You can't advocate for gay conversion therapy. We don't do that.
Yeah.
You can't advocate for, it's that French thing, is it called parkour, I think? You know, where these guys jump from building to building like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And some of them meet a untimely demise. We don't do that. We went through every single page, folks, with our lawyer, and we said, we don't do any of these things. And they said, well, you're demonetized anyways. That's what you're dealing with the Silicon Valley censorious slugs. They don't need a reason to demonetize you or deplatform you. We know there are things that we can't talk about. It's so bad, folks, I can't say what the things are that we can't talk about. That might get us in trouble. Man, do you think George Orwell is spinning in his grave right now, Sheila?
Yeah, I mean, we can't do even scientific things like questioning the science, which I think is how like things progress in the world. You question existing theories, you either prove them right or prove them wrong, and then come up with something else and then test that. We can't do that here on Rebel News. We can't even talk to people who do that on Rebel News. And we can't question the local public health authorities, even though their advice changes day by day. So I'm just pointing that out. I'm not making a moral assessment. I'm not defying it. I'm just laying out the rules, people.
Yeah,
Censors.
And speaking about laying out the rules when it comes to acquiescing and bending the knee to the fun burglars, well, you know, Sheila, I'll let you run with this first. It's out in your neck of the woods, Spruce Grove, Alberta. That's just outside Edmonton, I understand. And here you had people embracing their love of the haunted house in the Halloween season and raising money for charity. And what happens? Well, the fun burglars didn't like what they were doing, and now it is shut down. The photo that was used on CTV, I loved it, Sheila, on their haunted house. There you go. Temporarily closed due to a Karen and a Carl. By the way, is Carl now the official male version of Karen? Because I've been calling the male version of Karen's Karen since I learned about Karen being that derogatory term from the get-go.
I don't know. I'm going to go with what these people called them. And again, I want to reiterate my love of spooky season. I get excited when school supplies come out in like July, because after the school supplies go away in the stores, the Halloween decorations come out. And I got a problem. I buy a lot of Halloween decorations. You can tell that it's Halloween at my house from the International Space Station. I've got decorations everywhere. And one of the things my friends and family and I like to do, like I'll round up my nieces and nephews and my kids, we'll go to, for example, over the weekend, corn mazes or haunted houses, and we'll go through them, and then we'll come together, we'll have a bit of a meeting, and then decide how we're going to make them spookier. And sometimes, like, for example, over this past weekend, that involves me hiding in a corn maze and just jumping out and scaring people to make things a little spookier. I like spooky season. I like scaring people. And I like giving other people's kids candy and then sending them home full of sugar. I love all this stuff. I would be the best neighbor to these people who have a haunted house, because I would be like, okay, my shift in the haunted house starts at 5:45. We got to have an early dinner because I got to get spooky and I got to help with the haunted house. Instead, these poor people in Spruce Grove have awful neighbors. You people are the worst if you're watching. Let's go through this story. A family running a haunted house in Spruce Grove that supports the local food bank, by the way, has been shut down after multiple complaints. I guarantee you those multiple complaints are coming from the same busybodies. The Allens have hosted the Spruce Grove Ridge Scare for 5 years, and they've never received complaints about their haunted house till now. Okay, look around your neighborhood. Who just moved in? That's the bad guy, I think. All we're trying to do is help the food bank, Lindsay Allen told CTV News. We never thought we were causing a nuisance. First, the spooky attraction received a noise complaint. Oh, these fun burglars. But Emily said they quickly showed the city that they adhered to the noise bylaws and were not operating beyond 10 p.m. Then the haunted house received another complaint about the safety of its structure. It's a temporary haunted house, you awful people. Emily said, just awful. Emily said the inspectors came and walked through the Halloween event and cleared it. Then they suddenly received a notice from the city that it was to be shut down. Awful. They said it was a no-go. You can't let people through, Emily said. They said if we do, the city threatened us with a $100,000 fine. We are trying to find out what codes we have to meet. Last year's haunted house event collected 1,800 pounds of food and raised $800 in donations to the food bank. The Allens hope to have clarity from the city about what they need to do in order to be able to reopen safely in time for Halloween. We're just trying to do our best for the community in a fun way. It's a major disappointment. These people, whoever, if you're watching or if you know the people who called the city and persistent complaints one after the other, please let them know that I think they're horrible. Just horrible, horrible people.
Totally agree, Sheila. And Mr. Producer just noted the city is working with the Allens. Unfortunately, that is the number one lie, I think, on the list of all-time lies. The second being the check is in the mail. Number one is, hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. So I'll believe it when
I'm here to work
it.
with you.
Well, you know what the help is, Sheila? Buzz off. Leave me alone. Yeah. Stop threatening me with six-figure fines for putting smiles on people's faces. And what they did yesterday, as you said, 1,800 pounds and $800 to the food bank. Oh, no. There's some structural issue with Frankenstein's haunted castle. Are you kidding me? That's just so awful, Sheila.
And it takes a lot. Oh, look at that. So fun. I wish I had been able to go.
Yeah.
I don't even think that I would have to help them make this place spookier. Normally, for example, I would hide behind like that. It looks like a whatever. I think that looks like a werewolf. Normally, I would lurk behind the werewolf and wait for another family to come through, and they'll be looking at the werewolf and, oh, it's plastic. And then I would wait for them to go 2 feet ahead and then jump out and scare them. And then they would run and scream. And then my kids would be waiting up further and they would scare the people as they were running by already scared. You see, but it looks like I wouldn't even have to do that in this place. They wouldn't need my intervention.
And you know what? You go to Niagara Falls, Sheila, year-round, you pay good money to get the bejesus scared out of you at such places like Screamers and Creatures. I can't remember which one is home of Tony the Tongue, who has made 187,000 people run out of the haunted house at last count. It's like when McDonald's used to brag about how many hamburgers sold. They just now say billions and billions. I guess I got too lazy changing the sign. But, I'm not going to give away too much of this because I'll be interviewing this lady tomorrow in the the Greater Toronto area, Sheila. I mentioned this case. It's someone who's already been a victim of cancel culture, but she is a huge Halloween fan like you and I. She sent me some photos of her property. It's almost like theme park quality props, right? It's not Mickey Mouse Dollarama stuff just, spread around. She's put so much care into it. It was to raise money for a hospital. I won't name it now. I will name it in the report. Since she started this month, she's raised more than $2,000 for this hospital. And she gets a call from somebody in the administration. And I'm expecting that's so wonderful, and the kids, love the photos, and thank you for the fundraising that you're doing. That's always a key thing, what we're trying to do, especially since we have our own lottery to raise money. But no, it was, yes, I'm from the administration, and I want to find out about your safety protocols for COVID-19. Are you maintaining social distancing and masking? And are you asking if people are double vaxxed? What in blue hell? She was so furious. Not even a word of thanks, Sheila. And this was a hospital that had just recently laid off more than 100 healthcare workers for not going through their COVID nonsense. And so what she did yesterday, she told me, you know what, I can't deny this hospital the money because I said on my signage I'm raising it for this hospital. I don't want to be baiting and switching people. But as of yesterday, she switched to another charity, evidently, a charity that respects what she's doing and respects its own workers, aren't putting a gun to their head saying, get double jabbed or you've lost your job. I mean, wow, the level of pettiness and cruelty that we've seen during this pandemic, Sheila, it knows no bounds.
It's not just the pandemic. However, the pandemic has emboldened the worst among us because we've made being a tattletale a virtue, and not minding your own business, that's a virtue now. And so those people who normally just sit in their house and look out the window and scowl when they see other people having fun, now they're like, oh, there's a special hotline for me to call. I'm calling the cops on everybody now. And so those people are extra emboldened. Normally, in better times, these people are the neighborhood pariahs. They make fun of them because they just can't mind their own business. But now they think that their inability to keep their nose out of what everybody else is doing, that's their best quality, and the governments are rewarding it, and the news is rewarding it. The news publishes stories all the time about, how this person was caught breaking the rules and that person was caught breaking the rules but never actually hurting anybody, and they were dumb rules anyways. That's society these days, and that is one of the worst things to come out of the pandemic. I don't know if we're ever going to put that genie back in the bottle. I don't know.
And you know what, Sheila? When you say people are being rewarded by, say, calling like a government snitch line in Saskatchewan, I assume that's what you're referring to with a thank you, good citizen. You've done a great spying duty for the state. We're talking also cash rewards. I'm also working on another story, just arranging for the whistleblower to come on camera, hopefully sometime this week. There are several Toronto area hospitals that are, they've already got a threat to their unvaxxed or those who don't give their vaccination status.
We got to be careful. We're still on YouTube. Be very careful. We're still on YouTube.
I'm just saying what,
Just, talking the news.
That's right. And so that means in some cases, hundreds of people have already left the job or being forced out. Others face a deadline. November 15 is a big one in these parts. And how do you, compensate for the fact that we're being told all the time that the healthcare facilities, the hospitals, are strained to the seams? It's a war zone there, and you're firing or threatening to fire remember the frontline heroes just mere months ago, these people putting in those long hours, helping people survive. The frontline heroes, if you are not revealing your vax status, you're now a frontline zero. Well, Sheila, the healthcare double vax workers are now have been given the offer of being headhunters, which is to say, hey, if you can find somebody to replace your colleague who we just made walk the plank because of medical privacy reasons on his or her behalf, we'll give you $1,000 for getting that new hire. Can you imagine? And by the way, the hospital is doing that. They're saying, as they say down at the carnival, Sheila, let's not kid the kidders here. They're saying, it's coincidental this incentive program is hitting right now.
I know.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine? How do you say that with a straight face?
This is East Germany levels, like of telling your neighbor, get rewarded for it. That it feels just like that. On the flip side, though, there are some still good people out there. For example, I did a story about a nurse who resigned from the Alberta health system because she said she could no longer work for an ethically compromised organization. She's a lady of faith. She got into nursing sort of through mission work, and she decided, I'm going to go work for as a nurse in a private capacity. And somebody emailed me and said, I'd like to give her a job. And so, like, in a private capacity, and make her, I hope, a comparable job offer to her current position. So there are good people out there who see our stories and think, I have the ways and means, at least, or the connections to do something about this. So while there are snitches of the world, sometimes you get those really good people out there who see stories and reach out to us and say, well, I have the ability to make this one situation a little bit better. And let that be a lesson to everybody out there who's like scared of coming forward and telling your story. You're going to get more support than you are going to get backlash. And sometimes if you do lose your job, there are people on the other side who are willing to pick up the pieces and say, that really good person that those awful people threw out, I'm going to hire you. So there's that side of it too.
100%. Well, anyways, as much as they try to eradicate the fun out of Halloween, I say even if the trick-or-treaters are not going to be coming in the same volume. I saw a poll that the mainstream media was just gushing about, which I think was 56% of Canadians are not going to allow their children to go trick-or-treating. Well,
awful. I'm calling the police.
I know.
You want to talk about Karens? I'm calling the police on all those parents who won't let their kids go trick-or-treating. 100%.
So, and I was going to say something, and then my Silicon Valley censorship chip kicked in. I'm kind of like Commander Data on the Enterprise. I have a little chip that kicks in when I'm about to experience fear or something like that, so I can still maintain my job. So I won't say it. But I see the other article, because there's 3 things that we have that are YouTube safe. And Sheila, this is eerily reminiscent. Shuffle. Pardon me?
We should talk about the cabinet shuffle too. Holy smokes.
Just in. First and foremost, I noticed Steve Guilbeault, the Environment Ministry. There you go. So that seems to be a perfect circle, because it was in the name of environmentalists that this guy was criminally charged and convicted, wasn't it, Sheila?
Yeah, back when he was with Equiterre. Equiterre, by the way, was a recipient of money from the Tides Foundation for specifically the tar sands campaign to block Canadian oil and gas. And now this guy is in charge of overseeing the Alicia approvals process of oil and gas projects. So say sayonara to the booming Alberta oil patch. I just saw some numbers today that said that our drilling rates are 10 times what they were last year. This is going to send a chill through a recovering industry. It's not good at all. And he's probably not even the least worst in all of this. Oakville MP Anita Anand is going to defense.
Well, you know why that is, Sheila. Let's be honest. That's because of her sex. She is female, and they've got all these...
They make no bones about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's that simple. So, again, I question if she has the merit, not because she's female, but the reason why she's there is because she's female, and they're going through lots of sexual impropriety allegations in the military. And this is Justin Trudeau's knee-jerk response. Well, let's put a woman in charge.
Well, and the CBC really makes no bones about it. The third sentence about it says that Oakville MP Anita Anand becomes only the second woman in Canadian history to take on the role of defense minister after former Prime Minister Kim Campbell in the 1990s. I think we are going to be just as inept as Kim Campbell. She's the one who basically got trounced by China when it comes to procurement. And she mishandled all the procurement for PPE. Now she's going to be mishandling procurement for the Department of National Defense. This is just going to be a catastrophe. But yeah, she's there because she's female and they're dealing with a sexual misconduct crisis in the upper ranks of the military. And the architect, as he liked to call himself, Harjit Sajjan, he's been bumped to Minister of International Development. So that's Minister of handing out your money to developing nations to fight climate change and to abort their babies. And Melanie Joly, for her good work in promoting a Netflix tax, received a major promotion this morning, moving up from Minister of Economic Development and Official Languages to a much higher profile as Jesus Take the Wheel Foreign Affairs Minister. This is not going to be great. She takes over from Marc Garneau, who is no longer in cabinet, who I don't like. I don't like him. He might be the only grown-up. I disagree with him on everything, literally everything. I don't know how an astronaut can be so dumb on so many things. I don't like him, but I feel like he was the only actual grown-up remaining in the Liberal Party, and what a different Liberal Party it would have been if he had won the leadership, but here we are, and he's shuffled right out of cabinet.
Well, I don't know how much of a grown-up he is, Sheila. In 2019, I was in his riding in Montreal, and I went to interview him. He was having some, tea and crumpet social. This was for the 2019 election. And this astronaut, man, talk about blast off. All systems are go. He literally ran away from me. He wouldn't answer any of my questions. So I don't think that's very grown-up behavior. I mean, come on, be a man. Answer my questions. They're fair questions. But again, rebel delusion syndrome kicking in big time.
Patty Hajdu is shuffled out of health. Yeah.
The most, I think, and I know it's a low benchmark, but I would argue she might be the most incompetent of all the ministers, Sheila.
She had no idea what she was going to be saying day to day. She's like, no, don't close the borders. That's xenophobic. Close the borders. Lock everybody in their house. I mean, a week ago, she was saying no unnecessary travel. And Justin Trudeau is taking an entire entourage now to Glasgow for the climate change conference. So like pick a lane, sister. However, she means lock us in our houses, not the Liberal ministers, because she at the same time was also saying, oh, no unnecessary travel. Oh, here's me in the Arctic that I traveled to this past week for some reason. So I think that was sort of setting the stage, by the way, her travel to the Arctic, because she becomes Minister of Indigenous Services and Minister responsible for the Federal Economic Development Agency for Northern Ontario. So I don't know. Sorry about your chances of getting clean water, friends on reserve. But if history is any indication, Patty can't do anything right, and she mishandled the pandemic, and so now she's going to mishandle everything that happens on Canada's First Nations reserves. Just a big, here's her in the Arctic after literally days after saying no unnecessary travel. But here's me having travel, so that's fine.
I'm studying that photo very carefully. I'm trying to see if Climate Barbie is skiing by in her cross-country skis, which she allegedly uses in Ottawa to commute around when there's, 1.8 centimeters of snow. But hey, it's a good photo op, right?
Yeah. We've got a new Minister of Censorship, by the way. Former government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez takes over as Heritage Minister, which is, as you know, the rewriting that's the Ministry of Truth here in Canada, for those of you who know your Orwell. And a number of new portfolios have been created because, of course, let's grow the size and scope of government. It's already too big, too expensive. But now we have Carolyn Bennett moves to a new position as Minister of Mental Health and Addictions and Associate Minister of Health. That might be the only one that I possibly agree with, but I don't know if it needs to be a ministerial position, but it should be like a parliamentary secretary on addictions. We have a real crisis in addictions, but I don't know if she needs to be a full minister. She should just focus on the opioid crisis. And as you'll remember, she was recently forced to apologize publicly to Jody Wilson-Raybould after suggesting the Indigenous MP's expressions of concerns about residential schools and Indigenous rights were actually a ploy to secure a generous MP's pension. What a piece of work that lady is.
She should also apologize if she hasn't already. What I'll always remember is when she was part of the Chrétien cabinet, Sheila, and she voted against, was it the Hep C compensation package? Victims of Canadians who had the blood transfusions with the tainted blood. And she's a doctor. I know she wanted to vote in favor. It was a whip vote. If I had been her, because she is a doctor, she's taken the Hippocratic Oath, I would have resigned from cabinet or walk away from the Liberal Party entirely. That was despicable, voting against the compensation for those innocent victims.
Oh, look at this. Alberta MP, Edmonton Centre, Randy Boissonneau, who was in government, then out of government, and then back in government. He's the new Minister of Tourism and Associate Minister of Finance. Seamus O'Regan, who, as far as I know, has never actually had a real job except reading things written by other people on a teleprompter, is now the new Minister of Labour. I'm just curious here. There's a Minister of Prairie Economic Development, and I'm curious where he's from. Is Dan Vandal from your neck of the woods, David?
No, that's a good question, Sheila. I mean, that's not really a household name, is it?
St. Boniface in Manitoba. So at least he's sort of headed towards the west, but he's
closer to you than me. Vandal.
I don't know. Dan Vandal. Prairies Economic Development Canada and Canadian Northern Economic Development Agency. So he's kind of from the west, although central. I mean, could it have killed this government to actually put, as much as I dislike them, a Western Liberal MP like from Alberta in charge of Prairie Economic Development? Probably would have killed them.
Manitoba's a funny place, isn't it, Sheila? Is it east or is it west? And I say that because when you look at the CFL, whenever Montreal or Ottawa, those franchises go out of business and they need another team in the east, it's always the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And then when we find some other sucker to buy the Ottawa or Montreal franchise, they're put back in the west. So it's this interchangeable, it's like they're in the Romulan neutral zone or something like that. Sometimes they're west, sometimes they're east. I don't know.
This is just a disaster. So Freeland is staying at finance.
Of course.
That's the Ministry of Inflation. And she's staying on as Deputy Prime Minister. And David Lametti stays on as Attorney General and Minister of Justice. So it's just...
And in terms of Deputy Prime Minister, where she has her eye set on. It's to remove the word deputy, right? Let's make no mistake about that. Yeah, and I can't help but think, Stephen Guilbeault, who was arrested, he was tried, he was found guilty of doing those illegal environmental shenanigans, and here we are in October of 2021. He's the Minister of the Environment. It reminds me of that scene in Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, Sheila, where the protagonist Alex, he's victimized, and the two police that come to take care of him, lo and behold, it turns out to be his ex-gang members, his ex-former droogies, because the state right now, they're so overwhelmed with crime and the prisons are so overwhelmed that they've decided, well, let's just take the people we arrest, put them in a policeman's uniform and put them back out in society. So kind of like recycling the bad guys who remain bad, but they wear the uniform of the good guy.
Yeah, I was just actually talking with Michelle Sterling from Friends of Science, who that woman is completely vindicated because she's been banging the drum of the foreign meddling in oil and gas since at least 2011. And now the Alberta Inquiry has determined that $1.3 billion flowed into Canada through our environmental NGOs, most of it from out of the country, to block Canadian oil and gas, and Stephen Guilbeault was one of those guys. And his name turns up in some of those documents getting money from Tides to Equiterre. And where did Jolie land again? I've got on my other screen here an ATIP about her expenses. Now that people are shuffled around all those things that I've been sitting on my desktop in little files, I'm like, let's open up that dossier on Guilbeault, because I've been waiting for him to move into environment, because that's where he was always going. Now I can talk about some of those things that compromised him.
Wow, what a dream team, eh, Sheila?
Yeah. Minister.
Not exactly Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Craig the Hammer Valentine, that dream team, right?
What in God's name? Yeah, I've got emails or expenses from just right here from Jolie's trip to China. That would have been in 2017, wherein she charged $506 for laundry to the taxpayer. And so now she's Foreign Affairs Minister. So those expensive trips are just going to get worse, because she did that as Minister of Economic Development.
And you know what, Sheila? You know what's so appalling about that? In yesterdecade, if you recall, remember Bev Oda charging, I believe it was $16 for an orange juice, and it was front page headlines endlessly until she had to resign. I mean, $16 for a glass of OJ, that's chump change compared to how these liberals are whining and dining right now, and no media outcry. Gee, I wonder why that is.
Back to my dossier on these people. Our new labor minister, who is one of the dumbest people who's ever served in cabinet, Seamus O'Regan, literally one of the dumbest. And I'm being generous when I say that. Back when somebody was talking about, what are we talking about? So in 2018, he said that people were talking about immigration levels, and immigration levels is one of those things that all political parties are out of touch with the normal people on. And this goes across all political parties and partisanship, that normal people, when you poll them, normally they say, I'm for immigration, but our levels are too high. We got to slow down. We got to give our economy a chance to catch up. We got to give our immigrants a chance to integrate. All those things, right? It's not xenophobic to say, let's slow down, give everything a chance to catch up, and then let's just keep going. But he rejects that idea. He says that we need more jobs, more entrepreneurs, more taxpayers, of course, more customers and more families. And so he said, immigrants are better at creating new businesses and new jobs than Canadian-born people. It's simple. And he said this in 2018 in a tweet. I've got the tweet on my desktop right now, because we have little research dossiers compiled on all of these people. So we'll be dumping that out in the coming days as people, as we start examining more of the dumb things they said before they moved into their new portfolios. But yeah, I mean, Seamus O'Regan thinks that Canadians can't create jobs, and that we need immigrants to do it.
Where's his empirical evidence to demonstrate that thesis, Sheila?
Though the CBC, he links to a CBC article. Yeah, so I guess that's an indication of what's to come.
Jeez, how do you like that?
Yeah, how do you like that?
And
so, anyways, we're in for a wild ride, I think, for the next 2 years.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Sheila. The typical lifespan of a Canadian minority parliament is between 18 months and 2 years. What are you betting on in terms of the over-under? Do you think it's going to be sooner rather than later, or what?
I think it will be sooner rather than later, and not again because the government is falling on a confidence vote. I think it's going to be more of the same. Justin Trudeau is going to be highly opportunistic. He's going to strike while Conservatives remain wildly unpopular and their leader remains largely unknown, and those who do know him dislike him, and those who vote for Conservatives vote out of habit. Instead of out of policy, instead of because of enthusiasm. I think that Justin Trudeau is going to look at the polling and see that, okay, now's the time to go and try to get that majority. I think that's what's going to happen. And Conservatives are going to be caught flat-footed because they don't learn. They just don't learn.
Yeah, I agree with that analysis, and I think it's entirely dependent upon polling. When Justin Trudeau called the last election, don't believe the bull crap about him needing a majority mandate to get things through. Nobody was, no party.
No one was stopping him.
Jagmeet Singh, nobody was stopping him. It was the fact that the day he made that, dropped the writ, he had a 10-point lead in the polls. And that's what did it. I'm just, with this rogues gallery coming back into office, though, Sheila, and certainly the Canadian people did not, I mean, at the very least, they did not reward him with the majority. So the whole thing was like $610 million nothing burger. It's the status quo. Could he possibly experience another double-digit positivity showing in the polls to make him call yet again another early election?
I think so. I think he sees himself as not being punished whatsoever. Like, I'm not optimistic for anything. Canada's in a real state of affairs right now. We couldn't have worse people running the show, incompetent, inept, or anti-Canadian agenda driven in the case of Stephen Guilbeault. And where are the Conservatives? Scared of the CBC instead of scared of the voters they've lost. Oh, what's this? Andrew Lawton saying something important. Let me just, because he always does. I note there's no minister for middle class prosperity in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Is the middle class sufficiently prosperous now, or is the government finally accepted it was a make-work platitudinal post that achieved nothing? I wouldn't say I love Andrew, but I'm going to disagree. I think that it didn't achieve nothing. Actually, it rolled back middle-class prosperity. Oh, yeah. The middle class is paying more for everything. I saw on Fox News this morning, before I ran downstairs for the show, that Thanksgiving dinner is going to be more expensive than ever. Inflation is crippling much of the Western world, as our progressive leaders fail to do anything. And I think it's only going to get worse, and I'll tell you why. Because I think CN is going to have a real problem when it has to lay off unvaccinated workers.
November
and so that's
15th.
Going to cause supply chain issues.
And
further.
we already have supply chain issues. I mean, it's predominantly more of an American problem than a Canadian problem. And part of that has to do with the fiasco happening in the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports. You've got all those containers offshore. But by the way, Sheila, I must say this, even the business press, which should only be concerned with numbers and red ink and black ink, and they shouldn't be concerned with politics, but they being politicized, they're not telling a lot of the truth in terms of why merchandise is not getting onto American store shelves. And one of them is the policy of owner-operator transport trucks. Because they're non-union, they're being turned away at the port. So Joe Biden can say, well, we're going to operate the port 24/7. It doesn't make any difference. If there's no trucks to load that cargo on, that 100-plus freighter fleet is still going to be anchored offshore because of this because of ideology that you as an owner-operator, a non-unionized truck driver, an American citizen who pays his taxes, you are considered persona non grata. Unbelievable. But you don't see this getting reported even in the financial pages, which should not be picking and choosing political sides when it comes to financial issues. But we shall see what happens. I think. Just one more point to make on that. Drea has a really great video. I think it might be out just now about longshoremen and port workers in BC who are facing job loss because of their vaccination status. And so that's going to cause supply chain issues as we head into the Christmas season here in Alberta, because as you know, after spooky season, it's Advent. Yeah. And I wonder what CN's master plan is to keep the trains on track and what have you. Because, Sheila, as we've reported earlier, it's not just CN workers, but any subcontractors. It's basically any company that's going to go on CN property, you've got to be double jabbed. So... this is already a pretty grim situation as it is. What is it going to look like after November 15th?
It's just going to be a catastrophe. I think this is going to be a lot of people being mugged by reality. People who were, I'm pro-vaccine mandate, all this stuff, who are thinking, this is the best way forward. It doesn't affect me because I'm vaccinated, so I get to go out and I get to eat. Well, when your store shelves are empty because you were pro-firing all those people, you're about to get mugged by reality of what this bad policy does.
100%. And Sheila, I see you've dredged up an article. It must be from the CBC. Yeah, it is from the CBC. Ontario University sports apparently are, quote, extremely white, end quote. What's this about?
Oh, what isn't it about? CBC looks at everything through the lens of race, right? Yeah. So when I see kids playing sports, I'm like, oh, look at those kids having fun playing sports. They are really passionate for this. I don't get out my clipboard and I'm like, okay, well, you don't have a trans player. You need you have 10 people on the team. So you're going to need 3 people of color, 1 Indigenous kid, and 7 white kids are acceptable, and that's how it works. But there are people in the world who look at minor sports and think of it this way. And I don't understand. What a terrible way to go through the world with your demographic clipboard and just checking off every event that you see. There are things that some people like to do and other people don't like to do. I think, of course, naturally, everybody should have an opportunity. But at the end of the day, if people don't want to do things, why do they have to do them to meet some arbitrary goal? I don't understand any of this.
Well, you know what, Mr. Producer has just mentioned we have the activist anti-racist professor who is behind this.
Oh, man.
There we go. So is this the bailiwick of an anti-racism activist? You do head counts, and if it's not to your liking, therefore the organization or the university is racist? Unbelievable. Sheila, I want to mention a story.
Hang on for a second. Before we just go any further, there are sports out there that are largely minority, right? Like basketball? Football sometimes. Bowling is probably more white than basketball. I don't understand how that's a problem. If everybody has the opportunity to play these things and you end up liking something better, why do we need an activist in the middle of it all?
Well said, Sheila. If I'm a coach, whether it's at the college level or in the professional level, I am basing your admission onto my team based on merit. I don't care what you believe in. I don't care your skin color, your religion. If you can, score goals like a Gretzky, if you can dunk baskets like a Michael Jordan, that's the be-all and end-all. And I want to tell you something. The CBC loves race-based stuff, even when it comes to sports, and so does the Toronto Star. And about 20 years ago, Sheila, it's very hard to find this article. It's like it's been scrubbed from the internet, but it was front page of the Saturday Star, and it was a story called The Toronto White Jays. And the premise was this. In this multicultural city we have in Toronto, why are there so many white players on the Toronto Blue Jays? And my God, Sheila, did the Toronto Star ever shoot themselves in the foot with a bazooka? Because, and I want to apply this logic to the CBC story when I get a chance. When you started to crunch the numbers, when you looked at the number of Latino players on the Toronto Blue Jays at the time, the number of African American players on the Toronto Blue Jays, the number of, say, Dominicans on the Toronto Blue Jays, guess what, Sheila? Those numbers were greater than the percentage in terms of the city as a whole. So say, for example, there is 3% of black people. I don't know if this is the figure. I'm just doing this for by way of comparison, of black people that live in Toronto. Well, the Jays had 9% of their roster made up of black people. So we're overrepresented in terms of race, not less. And the Star had to apologize. They had to retract. They had to do a mea culpa. The Toronto Blue Jays organization lost their minds over this story because there was no racial conspiracy. I mean, my goodness, you can see, especially in these days, how woke pro sports teams are. But the fact is, would the Toronto Star ever do a story called, I don't know, the Toronto Black Raptors? Like, why is 90% of the roster black? Of course not. So the race card only works. They only evoke it when it is involving white Caucasian athletes, not the other way around. And like I said, what you and I should do, Sheila, as a project, we should look at the rosters, if we can get the racial demographic information, so that if we pick, say, the University of Windsor, and we look at how many minorities are on the roster versus how many people of that minority class live in the city of Windsor, I bet the same statistical situation will happen as it did with the Toronto so-called white Jays.
Well, and what are we supposed to do here? So this is varsity level sports or, university level sports. Yeah, the report recommends mandatory and continuous anti-racism training and a shift in how athletes and coaches are recruited. A shift to what? From the best to checking an identity box? Rather than looking for student athletes only at private schools and pay for play clubs, teams should hold open tryouts, the report recommends. I don't know if that's even accurate. This sounds like it's written by someone who's never actually been involved in high-level sports. They recruit from all over because they literally want the best. So they don't just look at private schools. They don't just look at these clubs. And for some kids that I know, this is an opportunity for them to get into schools that they would never even dream of getting into, that their families could never afford. And so what? We're supposed to shuffle those kids out? Those kids who've worked their whole lives because they're white and we don't have enough people of color on the roster? This is horrible. This is stealing from kids who've worked for it.
And it's statistically flawed. Sheila, there was another story. I remember doing a commentary for it a few years ago here for Rebel, and it was about how the number of black players in Major League Baseball has seriously declined if you compare it to, say, the 1980s. Now, at first blush, oh my goodness, Major League Baseball teams are being racist against blacks? Well, no, because a lot of these athletes are multi-disciplined when they grow up in the States, and they're playing the big three sports, baseball, football, and basketball. And the numbers of black players in the NFL and the NBA has correspondingly increased. And the reason I think it has, in terms of the bling bling cool factor, NFL and NBA trumps Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is increasingly an older and older audience. And, for the whole street cred thing, basketball and NFL would be considered cooler sports to play at the professional level. That's why there's fewer black players in baseball now as opposed to the 1980s. Has nothing to do with racism. It has everything to do with black athletes choosing different sports to earn their millions of dollars.
I just can't even imagine these busybodies saying to like a national level sports team like the All Blacks or the Ferns in New Zealand, where the team is overwhelmingly Indigenous, and saying, you know what, don't have enough white people on here. Let's get some white people on here, and then you can lose. The Indigenous players are the best in the world in rugby, but we're not, are we saying to them, you know what?
Yeah.
The Canadians want to win. So if you could just get rid of some of your better Indigenous players and put some mediocre white ones on there, just, so that we're balanced. No,
show me a
put the
sport.
best ones on the team.
Yeah. Sheila, show me a sports team that subscribes to affirmative action or employment equity, and I'll show you the last place team. Okay? That's all I have to say about that. Speaking, well, it's not so much race as gender, I suppose. Thankfully, despite all the mounting pressure, Dave Chappelle isn't backing down. To me, Sheila, we discussed this before. This was a real line in the sand for me. Before Dave Chappelle's third and final Netflix comedy concert aired, the usual suspects were screaming about transphobia. That's the big one these days. And I thought we have to see if Netflix is going to bend the knee and acquiesce to, I'm not even going to call it the trans community, Sheila. I'm going to call it the radical trans community. A percent of a percent of a percent of loony activists that see this as a safe space issue. Can you imagine a man making comedic observations about a class of people? And thankfully, Netflix did not bend the knee. I think a lot of that had to do, let's be honest here, with the fact that, Netflix paid Dave Chappelle $60 million for those 3 specials. So they're not going to put a $20 million investment into a concert and not air it and not get a return on investment. That's one. And lo and behold, I would argue, more people than anticipated tuned into that special, Sheila, because of the controversy. It's the Barbara Streisand law of unintended consequences. But he said he'll have a discussion with them. But as far as an apology, radical trans community, take a long walk off a short pier.
Yeah, do we have a clip, AD? Perfect.
There we go.
It's been said in the press that I was invited to speak to the transgender employees at Netflix, and I refuse. That is not true. If they had invited me, I would have accepted it, although I am confused about what we are speaking about. I said what I said, and boy, I heard what you said. My God, how could I not? You said you want a safe working environment at Netflix. Well, it seems like I'm the only one that can't go to the office anymore. I want everyone in this audience to know that even though the media frames this, that it's me versus that community, that is not what it is. Do not blame the LGBTQ community for any of this shit. This has nothing to do with them. It's about corporate interests and what I can say and what I cannot say. For the record, and I need you to know this, everyone I know from that community has been nothing but loving and supporting. So I don't know what all this nonsense is about. In summer 2020, when the whole world shut down, I was outside doing shows. My neighbor had a cornfield, and he let me throw shows there, and people came from all over the country. Some people came from around the world to see those shows. The best comedians on earth came to my home and broke bread with me. And we lived our lives. We found a way to keep moving forward. I made a whole documentary about it. The first night of those shows was a piece that some of you might have seen. It was called 846, and it dealt with the death, the murder of George Floyd.
Well, this is the thing. We've talked about this before, Sheila. The idea of offensive or deemed to be offensive comedy affecting the workplace. as a safe space environment, as though a live wire just dropped from the ceiling and you stand to be electrocuted. No, I'm sorry, you do not have the right not to be offended. Certainly in the United States of America, where the First Amendment is about freedom of speech. And yet it's so good to see somebody taking a firm position against these radicals. We have a situation right now, I can tell you, Chris Rock, Sheila, Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, imagine Jerry Seinfeld, someone who has never dropped an F-bomb, as far as I can tell, ever in a concert. They won't even go on college campuses anymore. Can't go there. Yep. Everything's offensive to the snowflakes there, the gender study students. So it's good to see that there is no retraction, no apology, and as the old saying goes, the show must go on, and the show went on. And there you go, Jerry Seinfeld. College students don't know what the hell they're talking about. And I would say hell is one of the strongest words Jerry Seinfeld has ever used, right?
Yeah, I mean, as risque as he ever got was maybe the B movie. You know what I mean? I think the only reason Netflix hasn't folded on this, because I thought they were getting shaky late last week. I think the only reason they haven't folded is because Dave Chappelle is giving them the moral support not to fold. I think in any other instance, with any other comedian, they would have apologized. They would have put a trigger warning in front of the content, or maybe even pulled the content down. But because Dave Chappelle is standing in the fire and is, like his word said there, he will meet with them, but he will not be summoned by them, that Netflix isn't folding. And so hopefully Netflix learns a little something here. Again, I'm not optimistic that they will. I think this might be just a one-of thing.
It's a good question because Chappelle is who he is. But, I mean, Chappelle can't back down, Sheila. He is the writer of the content. It's not as though he was the presenter of something Netflix gave him to read. And, again, I think the moral of the story is that even if Dave Chappelle did bend the knee, do the mea culpa to the radical trans community, guess what, Sheila? As you well know, it's never enough. They would not applaud him. They would not say thank you. They would not show appreciation. They would move the line even further and say, well, what about that? Or what about what she had to say? You cannot appease these people, period. So stop trying to do so.
Well, and really, should Netflix be shocked by any of this? It's Dave Chappelle. He's the guy who came up with, Clayton Bixby, the black white supremacist, and Charlie Murphy's True Hollywood Stories. He's made a career on saying risque things and being somewhat offensive. That's why people love him. That's why even during the pandemic, people were coming out to the neighbor's farm, as he said, to hear him speak. He's one of the few remaining people out there that isn't just sanitized in their comedy to the point where it's insufferably boring and all they do is talk about, have you ever tried to watch a Netflix comedy special that isn't Dave Chappelle? It's the worst, right?
It's three humanoids walked into a bar. It's so innocuous.
Yeah.
And how cool would that have been last summer, eh, Sheila? Kind of like Shoeless Joe, Build It and They Will Come. Having a comedy concert in a cornfield, right? That's like something you'd see out in Alberta, I guess, right? I wish I knew about that. I might have tried to get across the border somehow.
Well,
I don't think that's going to happen for years, though.
Have you ever tried to watch Amy Schumer's comedy specials?
No.
It's insufferable. Thank you for not wasting your time doing it. I did it one time just to see if it was as bad as Matt Walsh was saying it was bad on the Daily Wire. It was worse. And she's just so dreadfully unfunny. It was like she wasn't even trying, and she just got the gig because she was female and because I guess she's body positive or however these people get their jobs. But I mean, it was just really bad. And they paid her some enormous sum of money to be unfunny. I could do it for half that.
100%. And it's funny when you look at tyrannical regimes, one of the genres of entertainment they hate, Sheila, is comedy, because comedy does speak the truth in a humorous manner. And after you laugh, you start to think about the joke you heard. You start to think about the punchline, especially if it's aimed at those in charge. And those in charge in a dictatorship absolutely loathe the idea of comedy. It does not happen. Yeah, you can sing, there can be approved plays, but comedy is verboten. You know, the very best comedy not only makes you laugh, Sheila, it makes you think. And a lot of that content does fall into the bailiwick of Dave Chappelle, and he shouldn't be censored for it. He should be applauded for it.
Yeah, if I get to listen to Chelsea Handler talk about her promiscuous, privileged lifestyle, then give me Dave Chappelle to balance it out. Thank you very much. I know AD wants us to get to chats because we're already 4 minutes past the hour.
Unbelievable.
I know. How did this even happen? So we've got from Cindy Mc7 gives us $10. Thank you very much, Cindy. Oh, you know what, AD, can we just say goodbye to YouTube real fast? Because these are going to put us into danger country.
So it's not us that would be the author of our own demise. It's our beloved viewers.
Yeah. Any reason to get rid of us.